Our next bill is House File 1130, Representative Tapke. With that, I move that House File 1130 be laid over for possible inclusion. I see that we have the A1 amendment, the author's amendment. So Representative Tapke, whenever you're ready, please move your amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yeah, I have the A1 and the A3 amendment are both mine. So I move the A1 amendment as an author's amendment.
All right, to your A1.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So with this bill, House File 1130, do you want me to talk about the bill now, or do we want to get it?
To the A1 amendment.
The A1, just we've been working with a variety of different stakeholders on this bill to help make sure it works as well as possible for everyone. And this one is from different folks in the ag community to make sure that we have very clear language in here that if there is, make sure that we are able to exempt ag land within cities.
All right, discussion to the A1 amendment. Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. The ayes have it and the motion prevails. The A1 is adopted. The next amendment is the A3. To the A3, Representative Tapke.
This one just makes very clear as to what pesticides can and cannot be used in wood preservative products, Madam Chair.
All right, discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and the motion prevails. The A3 amendment is adopted. Now it is in the shape that you want. To the bill, Representative Tapke.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So this bill is House File 1130. This is a local control bill that allows communities to work with and do what is best for them and their communities. If they have folks that are concerned about use of pesticides from a variety of angles, that they are able to exempt to make sure that those pesticides are not to be able to use in their community. There's a significant number of folks across the world who and across the United States who have different levels of exemption of not exemption. I keep using that word and I should not. I apologize, but of preemption of utilizing some different types of pesticides in their communities. And so we have a list of things that cannot be preempted in this bill. So it focuses on pollinator-lethal pesticides. So as we've been talking about today, this is the purpose of this is make sure that we aren't killing off all of our friends. And so this does not apply to pet care products, personal care products, indoor pest products, pesticides used by mosquito control district, wood products, and then as the amendments put forward, we exempted ag land as well in case there's something around Palmer amaranth infestation or something like that that happens on ag land, that we are able to control those issues without concern about preemption to make sure that the state is taken care of. So thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, we'll move to testimony first and then we'll have discussion. Please keep it under 2 minutes. The first one is Indira Falana from the city of Minneapolis. If you can please identify yourself before the committee and proceed.
Hello, good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Indira Falana, and I'm a government relations representative with the city of Minneapolis, and I'm here to speak in support of House File 1130. We know that pollinators are a necessary component of a healthy ecosystem and food system, providing essential pollination of plants in order to grow vegetables, herbs, and fruits. Local food production is needed to improve the health and food security of Minneapolis residents, and insect pollination is an essential component of local food production. So we are proud to be one of 44 municipalities in the state that is pledged to be pollinator friendly. And in 2015, our city council unanimously passed and adopted a resolution declaring Minneapolis a pollinator friendly community. And with this resolution, we celebrated current policies and practices that protect and support pollinator health, including reducing the city's pesticide use, while we also encouraged our residents and businesses to adopt pollinator-friendly practices, such as committing to not using pesticides, including systemic insecticides on their property, and also avoiding planting flowering plants that are treated with systemic insecticides. House File 1130 would complement the resolution and pledge that the city of Minneapolis has made to ensure that we protect pollinator populations by allowing all Minnesota cities to prohibit the use of pollinator-lethal insecticides within their borders. We appreciate the committee for taking up this legislation and thank Rep. Tabke for carrying this bill. Thank you.
All right, next testifier is Aaron Rupp from Pollinate, Minnesota. If you can please identify yourself before the committee again, proceed.
Hello, Madam Chair, members of the committee. This is the last time you'll hear from me today. I'm Erin Roop. I run Pollinate Minnesota. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a board member of Pollinator Stewardship Council, a mom of 2 kids who are 5 and 2. I strongly support all these bills. Thank you so much for your bravery in hearing them. I'm a beekeeper. I hang out with one species of insect a whole lot. And we know as of last month, thanks to the DNR, to you all for funding this research, that we have over 500 species of bee in Minnesota. Because researchers thought to look in marsh ecosystems in the spring and found 40 new species who had been here the whole time, but now we know about them. And this is an estate that has, over the last decade, contributed significant state funding to pollinator research and habitat. It's an estate where we have one of the top bee research labs in the world. So this very tangible and visible pace of discovery has my heart. Insects are so diverse, and just because our discovery is new does not mean their existence or critical niche in ecosystems is. We are killing them with our pesticide use, both acutely in one exposure, chronically over time. It's not a mystery. Legal use of pesticides as currently regulated by law, with the label as the law, as I'm guessing we may hear some today, by the EPA and the MDA is directly causing death and decline to our pollinators and ecosystems. And Representative Cha, thank you for bringing in that 30% loss number. Average loss of honeybees for hobby beekeepers in Minnesota last year was 76%. And if we weigh that for towards commercial beekeepers, it's a little better at 58%. But that's if you do everything right with generations of experience, half of your livestock die annually. We talk about honeybees because we measure them and see them, and it's inherently easy to gather data on them. But this system is continually choosing this poisoning, continually justifying it, as you may hear today. And municipalities around the state have passed resolutions to be pollinator friendly and are doing what they can to protect pollinators and ecosystems. And this bill would untie their hands to give them the action step to mitigate these exposures if they choose it. So thank you for your support of House File 1130 and for your time.
All right, next one is Rob Greer from Minnesota Pest Management Association. If you can please identify yourself before the committee, proceed.
I'm Rob Greer, Associate Certified Entomologist and representing Minnesota Pest Management Association, which is the primary trade group representing the structural pest management industry in Minnesota. Our companies manage pests including rodents, ants, cockroaches, bedbugs, mosquitoes, spiders, stinging insects, termites, and other pests in countless commercial, residential, and institutional settings. And approximately 97% of pest control companies in Minnesota are small businesses, which feel the impacts of these things pretty heavily. The goal of this legislation is to protect pollinators. Other things to consider are it will give 853 cities the right to ban neonics and other pesticides at will, not based off of science, but based on sentiment. In the previous bill, we covered some of the difficulties in testing, and the Department of Ag is set up for that. Individual cities are not. Since honeybee colony collapse disorder was identified in the late 2000s, it is well researched and understood that the main culprit is the varroa mite, not pesticides. A lot more can be found out from the University of Minnesota Bee Lab on this. In fact, there were 125,000 honeybee colonies in 2021 in Minnesota, and that's more than 5,000 more than the 120,000 that existed in 2003 before colony collapse disorder. If we really want to do something to protect the pollinators, we don't want to take away the tools that are being used to protect people, structures, and the environment. Instead, let's promote planting pollinator-friendly plants, educate consumers of the dangers of do-it-yourself pesticides, or take them away from those people that don't have the training. We don't want to impact the trained, tested, certified, insured, and licensed applicators. We know what to apply, where to apply, when not to apply, etc. This legislation will do nothing to stop uneducated consumers from buying products off the internet or at home improvement stores and applying it themselves. Some of the unintended consequences from this with those 853 cities, they will not be able to ban 853 cities will not only be able to ban pesticides they want, but they will also become the licensing arm, the enforcement arm, and the testing arm. None of them are equipped or trained to do so. And shifting that because of the 12% of the state's population that it represents, that would represent a 12% budget cut for the Department of Ag. Can you imagine the nightmare of, especially these small businesses, 200 companies having to figure out 853 different sets of legislation? A lot of the technicians, especially in some of the outskirt markets, are having to cover 60 miles in a day, which can take into account several different things in one day, so that really complicates the issue for them. Some of the products we use could be at risk, including those for termites and flies. Termite treatments are required for FHA loans in most of Minnesota, and innocuous things like outdoor uses of fly bait to trash cans and dumpsters could be banned by cities if they opted in. Termites do more damage in this country than floods and fires combined, and they are a growing issue in Minnesota. Additionally, flies are known to be disease carriers, and losing access to fly baits would allow their populations to flourish.
Mr. Greer, if you can please wrap up your testimony.
Sounds good.
All right, next is Corey Bennett from Minnesota Soybean Growers Association. All right. Next, we have Nathan Newlands from Spring Touch Lawns over Zoom. If you can please identify yourself before the committee, proceed.
Yeah, my name's Nathan Newlands, Madam Chair and committee members. Thank you for your time today. My name is Nathan Newlands. I'm the Vice President of Operations for Spring Touch Lawn and Pest Control, which my father-in-law founded 50 years ago. We're a family-owned and operated business that employs around 80 employees in southern Minnesota, and we are one of those people that cover a large range of up to 60-mile radius from where we are. We are opposed to the HF1130, which seeks to shift regulatory power from the state to cities that greatly lack the resources, experience, and expertise to effectively regulate pesticide use. A shift to local regulation would create a disastrous patchwork of inconsistent standards that would make it nearly impossible for any business or applicator to do their job safely and efficiently. As a company, we work together with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture and our local inspector to ensure that we are abiding by all rules and regulations with the use of the pesticides. Every one of our applicators is licensed by the Department of Agriculture to apply the right pesticides. The Minnesota Department of Agriculture also works with the University of Minnesota to provide continued education, which is required by a licensed applicator to be completed every year or other year, depending on the licenses. As a lawn and pest control company, we help safeguard against invasive species that transmit dangerous and deadly diseases that threaten Minnesotans. Invasive species in one area will inevitably breed, grow, and relocate to other areas. Restricting pesticide use in one city unnecessarily jeopardizes the public health, not only in the one area, but in surrounding areas as well. Mosquitoes carry the West Nile virus, where a tick with Lyme disease won't be contained by political borders that separate the cities. As a business, we're extremely aware of the health and safety of the pollinators and their habitats, and it's our top priority to our applicators. If you were to visit our location here in St. Peter in summer, you would see wildflower beds and then also a lot of different trees and stuff to attract those pollinators. And whenever we encounter any customers with bee issues, we do reach out to our local beekeepers to able to come in and take that control of that situation. Minnesota Department of Agriculture and the EPA bring financial and human resources to bear on this important issue that are far greater than any individual city possibly could. I cannot, in my right mind, see any city having the wide range of knowledge and resources available to make the best scientific decisions that are needed. That is why these decisions should be left to the Minnesota Department of Agriculture and the EPA. We need decisions made on a state level that are clear, consistent with federal law, and based on scientific facts. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Our final testifier is Stovall. If you can please identify yourself before the committee and proceed.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time. My name is Terrence Stovall. I'm the state and local government manager for the National Association of Landscape Professionals, which is a national trade organization that represents the $98 billion landscape industry that employs over 1.4 million employees in the United States. Since 1987, the Minnesota Department of Agriculture has had the sole substantive regulatory authority over pesticides, including sale, distribution, application, use, and education. Minnesota is one of 44 states that has this statutory preemption over local regulation of pesticides. And all pesticide applicators in the state are certified and licensed by the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. So there's significant state and federal oversight to ensure industry compliance and the proper use of pesticide products. Any shift to local regulation will create a complicated and confusing patchwork of inconsistent standards that would make it nearly impossible for applicators to effectively protect and maintain work and recreational spaces within the state that all Minnesotans enjoy. NALP shares a desire to protect Minnesota's residents and ecosystems from pests and invasive species alike. But the reality is that local jurisdictions just lack the resources and expertise to effectively regulate pesticides. EPA employs more than 900 experts to review information on pesticide safety and efficacy before making a decision to register that product for sale and use. And after EPA completes their extensive review, the Minnesota Department of Agriculture also reviews each pesticide registration in relation to Minnesota. Municipalities cannot replicate this high standard of expertise, effective regulation, vast resources, and the safety protocols of both of these entities. The professional landscape industry implores the committee to consider the ramifications that local pesticide regulation would have on applicators who operate across city and county lines, and in turn, the effects that the inconsistent restrictions will have on mitigation efforts across the state. The MDA and EPA have established processes and a regulatory framework that maintains the safe use of pesticides based on scientific evaluations and reviews, and regulatory power should remain vested in them. It's for these reasons that the National Association of Landscape Professionals implores the members of this committee to maintain statewide uniformity and vote against this measure. Thank you for your time, and I yield back.
All right, and our next testifier is Russ Henry. If you can please identify yourself before the committee and proceed.
Hello, my name is Russ Henry, and I'm a Minneapolis resident. I'm the owner of Minnehaha Falls Landscape and the founder of Be Safe Minneapolis. I'd just like to say, Madam Chair, and to the committee, this bill before you is extraordinarily important. As a landscaper, I visit over 300 residential, municipal, and business properties per year. I consult with folks on these properties. And what I've been seeing in the field since I've been doing this for the last 20 years is staggering. When I'm visiting on home landscapes, I started keeping track of how often I'm seeing wind-pollinated trees being injected with insecticides. And it's around 67% of residences that I visit annually are injecting insecticides into native trees. Native trees are supposed to be buffets for wild insects, for the wildlife. And injecting them, allowing the injection of insecticides, neonicotinoids and others into these trees is absolutely irresponsible. We need to give the cities the power to legislate, to protect their citizens. If you think about all of that neonicotinoid is systemic. It goes into every part of the tree. Now, these are wind-pollinated trees. So I want us all to walk outside this spring and take a big, deep breath of that air that is filled with pollen, that is filled with neonicotinoid. We need to do something about this. And as an owner in this industry, I find it reprehensible that other representatives of this industry are coming in here and demanding that we keep things as they are. As they are is extinction. I am the father, most importantly in my life, of 3 boys, 2 8-month-old baby twins, Patrick and William, and I'm here for them. I want us to have a future with insects and frogs and birds. I want them to be able to know what wildlife is. Thank you.
All right, and with that, we will move to discussion of the bill. Representative Cha.
Thank you, Chair. I thought you recognized my colleague over there first, but well, that was really powerful. Thanks for the testimony. I want to also share that something similar in Woodbury. When I moved to Woodbury in 1996, we used to go fishing in those lakes, in those ponds. And they're like big bass and everything, and you'll see families with their kids fishing in Woodbury. That's 96. After 2003, no one's fishing on the banks. Nobody's even canoeing. It's heartbreaking as a father of 3 children, you know. And so what I want to ask you, Representative Tapke, is that you've been chair in Shakopee Chamber of Commerce. You've been on the chair of Parks and Rec. You've been the mayor of Shakopee. So give us into perspective, because I think your experience at the local level is important here, and why this bill is talking about local control. So can you talk about that? Thanks.
Yeah,
Representative Tapke.
thank you, Madam Chair and Representative Shaw. So those things are absolutely important because I feel that local communities, as often as we possibly can, should have as many of the decisions as possible. And this is one of those places where it makes complete sense for the local community to be able to make those decisions. But in addition to those things, I've also been chair of committee with the Minnesota Nursery Landscape Association. I have the National Landscape Association that testified. I've also been on committees with the National Landscape Association. And we see a lot of things. So if I were the Minnesota Nursery and Landscape Association, I would be extremely upset with the national organization because MNLA they're not happy with this bill, but they don't oppose this bill. There are things that they'd like to see done differently in the future, and we can continue to work on things. But there's a major problem that we have with how pesticides are used throughout the state of Minnesota and by landscape and by pesticide companies and different things like that. And through my work, I see it every day when you're out in the summertime and there are it's 90 degrees and the wind's blowing 30 miles an hour and there'll be companies out spraying turf, and that kind of thing should not happen. That is extremely dangerous to everyone in the area, to the pesticide applicator, and I'm the guy that reports all those things. And so I report it to the Department of Ag, and we roll with it from there. But I think it is important that we allow local communities to make those decisions as to what works best for their community. So thank you for the question.
Representative Harder.
Thank you, Chair Vang. Representative Tapke, I have a couple of questions. So according to the fiscal note, thank you for that, it says that this is going to allow cities to develop their ordinances, do their own licensing, penalties, and enforcement provisions. So basically, the city is going to take the responsibility versus MDA. My question might be more directed to the young lady from the city of Minneapolis. So has your city determined like how many FTE it will take to do this for their city?
Representative Tapke.
So this bill is not, this bill doesn't change anything other than giving the opportunity to not use pesticides in a community. That's the only thing that changes. And so if a community were to go down that road in deciding that if, we'll say the city of Shakopee chooses that they don't want to use a certain type of, broadleaf weed control or something like that, which like many municipalities and countries throughout the world and throughout North America have done that kind of thing, and there haven't been like significant detrimental effects whatsoever. And so there are other ways to handle these kinds of things. And so if that were to happen, that a community wanted to not use X or Y pesticide, then they would start down that road of working with the Department of Agriculture and understanding what it really means to do that. So depending on the municipality and the city, they would work with the Department of Ag to get that figured out, because right now, the Department of Ag has roles and responsibilities. If a community wanted to take on those roles and responsibilities, they can, and they will go through that process on their own. The state doesn't just say, hey, you can do this. You've got to go through and work with the Department of Ag and get that done to make sure all the roles and responsibilities are taken. So it would differ by community for sure.
Representative Harder.
Thank you, Chair Vang. So, taking, for instance, Representative Tapke, Shakopee. So I'm guessing that a number of businesses from outside of Shakopee come to your city to do whatever that they do for landscaping. How will the city go about informing all of these people that come to your city to follow the ordinance?
Representative Tapke.
Madam Chair and Representative Harder. So the way this would happen is if you look on, that MDA would keep a list. I don't remember exactly where that is on here, but it would, so there would be, the cities would make sure that that is advertised. And like right now, as was discussed many times by testifiers, there are 853 different cities. If we see more than a few different cities, I don't imagine there are many different communities that would take advantage of this legislation at this time. And no, but if we see many communities that start to go down this path, that indicates to the state that we should be making some changes. And there are some things from local communities that we can and should learn from as a state. And so having been in the shoes of someone who has applied pesticides and in cities throughout the metro, I mean, this is done all the time. Cities have different regulations for different things constantly. There are different regulations for irrigation. There are different regulations for water use. There are different regulations for a lot of things. It's just pesticides are something that they aren't able to make their own best choices for their community.
Representative Harder.
Thank you, Chair Vang. Thank you for that. So if the ordinances are passed, and let's say that the cities are not following, what will MDA do to a jurisdiction that fails to enforce? Is the department gonna fine or penalize the city? Will the department say, sorry, city, you're not following the rules? Whatever it is, what will the department do when a city fails to enforce their own rules?
Representative Tapke.
Madam Chair and Representative Harder, I don't really understand your question. If a city fails to do what?
Representative Harder.
So if the department determines that a city is not following their own ordinance, I'm guessing that department will be spot checking cities to see that they're following the ordinance. What does the department do? What
Representative
would the
Tapke.
department do?
Representative Tapke.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Representative Harder. So if, let's say, the city of Shakopee chooses to discontinue the use of some pesticide, the Department of Ag is not going to check on them to see if they're actually discontinuing the use of that pesticide or not. That's a city problem from there. That's not what the Department of Ag would do. The Department of Ag checks licensure and makes sure that things are being applied appropriately and that kind of stuff. But that's not something that would happen with this ordinance or just even in general.
Final follow-up, Representative Harder.
Okay, let me ask it another way. So the city creates the ordinance that follows, however that it is. Okay, so let's say that the city is not following its ordinance. What does the Department of Agriculture do? Would they take the jurisdiction back and say, sorry, city, you're not following, so therefore we're taking our authority back on for you?
Representative Tapke.
Madam Chair and Representative Hart, the Department of Ag doesn't care. Like, as long as when pesticides are being applied and being utilized, if they fall within the Department of Ag's umbrella of how that is all happening, they want it to be applied per labeling. They want to be applied appropriately and with licensure and correct licensure and that kind of thing. But if we'll keep using Shakopee, if Shakopee stops the use of some sort of pesticide, then the Department of Ag doesn't, if this passes, then the Department of Ag doesn't necessarily care if they use it or don't use it. I'm not sure, as long as it's being used when it's used per, Department of Ag, specifications, then they don't have a dog in the fight on this one.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Tabke, your bill does change things. If cities adopt this ordinance, I would assume they also adopt enforcement. And the gentleman from Minneapolis who testified that a lot of trees were being injected, that's not a good thing. I agree with that. But I don't assume the state is allowing that. I would assume a lot of it is being done on the side. And no matter who has the authority, the state or the city of Minneapolis, unless you have enforcement, that's going to continue going on. We're not going to probably stop that situation with this bill. You know, this bill's been around for many years. First it was cities of the first class, and I'd like to know, I don't have to call her up, but the lady from Minneapolis, how many more people you would have to hire to implement and enforce this registration regulation if the city took it on its own. And the last thing I'll say is, it always strikes me as ironic that I would assume the largest user of pesticides by far in the metro is the mosquito control district, and they're exempt from this. They always have been. They are in this legislation as well. So it just seems to me that we're kind of nipping around the edges, trying to, you know, be pollinator friendly and such, which is a good thing. But I don't think this bill really accomplishes that.
Indira, would you like to respond to the question? Representative Tapke?
Madam Chair and Representative Lee Anderson, the only thing I really want to address on that is the mosquito control district portion of this. They do just fascinating work on where they use and don't use. So I would absolutely encourage everyone. There's a lot of information out there, and the mosquito control does have great videos. Three Rivers Park District has great videos and information about how they utilize pesticides in very strategic, organized ways in order to meet their goals and work with issues, as was brought up earlier, around malaria and deadly diseases that could be transferred. So it's really interesting if you're a nerd, so.
All right. Perhaps, Indira, if you can follow up with the committee afterwards on responding to Representative Anderson's question of how many FTE it will take to follow through with this bill. Next is Representative Burkle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative Anderson beat me to the question, and so I won't ask it again, other than to say that maybe frame it up in the context of the rural and urban. I mean, are you saying, would this bill imply then that the city of Moorhead or a small town like Badger can't spray for mosquitoes? They could set up a city ordinance that says they couldn't. I'm just confused on why that would, well, how would that work?
Representative Tapke.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Representative Burkle. Again, I'm not sure I understand your question. Like, they don't have, this is, Metropolitan Mosquito Control District is a specified entity.
Right.
So that would not apply to Moorhead or Baxter, no.
So they do, okay.
Representative Burkle.
So then the question, I mean, the argument I'm making here, I guess, is, I mean, you mentioned the fascinating work they do, and I would make the case that, you know, I think there's all kinds of situations where farmers or landscapers or nursery owners, they do fascinating work too. And I think responsibly use pesticides, and I just think it's interesting that, you know, I'd be curious to know, and I don't want to outright call this bill, you know, virtue signaling, but in a sense it kind of is, if we're not going to be honest about it. So I'm just curious how folks in that district, in that metropolitan mosquito control district you're talking about, would be willing to give up the creature comforts of having mosquito sprayed for versus, you know, saving pollinators. Just a thought. Thank you.
Representative Jacob.
Thank you, Chair Banks. So just in the interest of understanding real-world application, my county, Winona County, emerald ash borer has run its course in my county. The only remaining trees are the trees that have been heavily injected with insecticide. So how would this bill affect remaining cities who are dealing with things of that nature? I mean, if they take advantage of this ordinance, can they treat their trees, or would they have to let them all die?
Representative Tapke.
Madam Chair and Representative Jacob, I'm not sure what's not clear about this, but this bill doesn't do anything to force the city to do something, to not do something. It just allows them. So if you have a community who is, all communities throughout Minnesota will deal with emerald ash borer at some point, and this is not saying that people have to or don't or can't do anything unless the community says so. So if your community has different needs and different specific needs, then your community can do it. So I'm not sure exactly what this, if you're trying to conflate things or change the subject, I'm not quite sure what the point of the question is around this doesn't force anybody to do anything with emerald ash borer. Like, this is allowing a community to do something if they want to, if they can help their community to save different insects because we have collapsing ecosystems and where things are going. But it doesn't force anybody to do anything.
Representative Jacob.
Well, I think the idea of using a real-world application of something that we're dealing with presently, what I'm saying is, we don't know what will happen in the future, but if the city thought that they were doing a great thing by adopting this ordinance and a new tree disease comes along and they've got this ordinance in place, then they just wouldn't be able to save those, in this case, save those particular trees. Or if they've adopted this, or retroactively, in my case, I'm just gonna single out perhaps a environmental group thinks that this would be a good idea, and the only trees remaining in the city of Winona, the only ash trees remaining are those that have been heavily injected with pesticides. If some people determine that we have to have this ordinance, then the rest of the people are gonna have to let their trees die, right?
Representative Tapke.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Representative Jacob. That is up to your city council. You've served on local government, I believe. I have as well. And local government is nimble and able to make decisions and to change things as, so if a new emerald ash borer comes along, which there are thousands of them that they could be, they can make decisions that are the right thing for their community. Or they can say that we're going to adopt Minnesota Department of Ag rules and regulations on XYZ topic, whatever that may be. It is, I know quite a few folks in Winona, and they're pretty smart, and I'm positive that they're awesome enough to figure it out.
All right, closing remarks, Representative Tapke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a bill that will allow local control to continue letting communities support their needs and support their community in the best way that they know. And also, I need to make a note that instead of this being laid over for possible inclusion, we are going to have this bill re-referred to the Environment Committee, Madam Chair, if that's all right. So that's what the motion will be for moving that in.
All right, Representative Tapke renews their motion that House File 1130 as amended be re-referred to the Environment Committee. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay.
No.
The ayes have it, and House File 1130 as amended is re-referred to the Environment Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair.